Hello and welcome to Theology Unleashed, the channel where Eastern theology meets Western skepticism. Today I've got a special guest on, Chaitanya Charan, and we're going to be doing questions and answers. We've had him on a couple of times and there's always been lots of questions and his answers have been appreciated. They're quite clear and to the point. And so we're going to carry on. We're going to start by responding to questions we had in the last video we did in the comment section there, and we'll go from there. So Chaitanya Charan, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to be with you and to see the wide variety of topics you have been covering and also the broad spectrum of speakers that you have been having. It's my pleasure and honor to be here.
Unfortunately, the internet's not so great today, so the video's a little compromised, but hopefully the audio will be fine. So we got a couple of questions from last time. Do you want to start with that, or you want to make a few comments to start off with?
So just a quick recap. Last time we had discussed about one way of bringing contemporary thought in dialogue with Vedic thought would be to examine or to view the thoughts of an influential contemporary thinker from the Vedic perspective. And that thinker we had taken was Jordan Peterson. And especially from the broad body of Vedic teachings, we had taken the concept of the three modes and discussed various aspects of his teachings from the perspective of the that wisdom, especially the insight about the three modes of material nature. Jordan Peterson is more of a psychologist than a philosopher, but while teaching psychology, he also views in philosophy into his talks. So that's what we had discussed, and I think there are some questions based on that. So we can go to those questions. It's a quick background.
Okay, cool. So the last one we did was follow up from questions from that stream about a Jordan Peterson style approach to Bhagavad Gita. So I've got this document I shared with you. The first one is, how do we go back home, back to Godhead, and how do we get rid of bad karma? For Christians watching, we might want to explain what we mean by back home, back to Godhead, or atheists too who aren't familiar with our theology.
Yes. So basically, two things. First is that there is the domain of matter in which we are currently existing. And above this, there is a higher domain of consciousness. That is, in the broad Vedic theology, as taught by Srila Prabhupada, that domain of consciousness is called the spiritual world. So within the broad Vedic thought, it is understood that the world we live in is a shadow, it's a reflection. And this is a place where life is temporary, life is unsatisfactory, and therefore we all crave to improve our life. Now, one way to improve our life is materially, where in this world itself we try to get things better. We may a better job, a better home, a better relationship, better social status. But that is considered to be improvement in the horizontal domain itself, because we are still at this material level of consciousness. The other improvement is at the vertical level, where we raise our consciousness to the spiritual level. And the principle here is that our consciousness functions at the level at which exist the objects to which we are attached. So if a person is attached to alcohol, then their consciousness is at that level, constantly craving for alcohol, or filled with thoughts about alcohol. A person is captivated with money, then that's the level at which their consciousness is. So within the Vedic parlance.
Oh, he seems to have dropped off.
A few moments later.
Oh, there you are. Okay. All right, let's carry on now. So just carry on with what you're explaining. I'm going to edit all the stuff out.
So I was talking about how the level at which our consciousness is primarily attached, that is the level at which we exist. So when our consciousness becomes attached to spiritual reality, then we rise to spiritual consciousness. And that is what is called as going back to Godhead. So in the Vedic context, especially in the Bhakti tradition, the spiritual reality at its summit is a divine person. That person is referred to as the Godhead, the personality of Godhead. So when we go back to Godhead, that means basically we develop a steady attachment to that divine reality, and then we attain that divine reality by that attachment. So the purpose or the process, so the process for getting to that level of consciousness, to go back to Godhead, is to develop attachment to Godhead, to direct our loving propensity toward the ultimate reality, and by that redirection of our consciousness to ultimately attain that reality.
Okay, so the next question.
Yeah, I can hear you. I think I lost you for a minute.
There's a few questions from Bhakti Vedanta Philosophy. So, first questions. My question is, why do living entities have to take multiple lives for going back home, back to Godhead? Why didn't Krishna make the purification process quick and steady?
Well, it's not that Krishna has made the purification process in a particular way. In the broad Vedic tradition, the purification process, Krishna is the name of the ultimate reality, and it's personal. So the affairs of this world, they are ultimately within Krishna's jurisdiction, and the path out of this world is also within his jurisdiction. But just because it's within his jurisdiction does not mean that he micro-controls everything. In the Bhagavad Gita, the example is given, Yatha akashasto nityam vayu sarvatra mahan. That just if you envision the sky to be like an upside down bowl, then the air which is inside that bowl, it can move left, it can move right, it can move top, it can move bottom. So the movement of the air itself is not restricted by the bowl. It is the area of the movement that is restricted. So similarly, for each one of us, we have free will. And it is not our free will that is restricted. It is the area over which the free will can extend. That is restricted. So right now I'm speaking, I can speak whatever I want. I can speak philosophy, I can speak something mundane, I can speak something about sports, politics. But right now I can't start roaring like a lion. I can't speak in a language that I haven't learned. So the point is that we have free will. And if certain things are more difficult for us than other things, that's not because God has made us difficult. That's because our free will is oriented in a particular way at present. So the process for redirection, the process for redirecting our heart's love from the world to the Lord, is a process that every living being has to consciously choose. And depending on the magnitude or the intensity of the attachments that we have in the world, that process of redirection may be easier or tougher. So it is, if there are obstacles on the path of redirecting our love, they are because of our own past choices and the conditioning that those choices have created in our consciousness. So it's not that Krishna has made the process difficult. It is rather our own past choices and the conditionings coming from there can make the process easy or difficult.
Okay, Bhaktivedanta
Yeah, go ahead, please.
also asks, why Krishna created so many different teachings from different religions in spite of the fact that it leads to world conflict.
Well, I'm losing you now. I can't understand what you're saying.
Oh, is my internet that bad? Jeez. The stream seems to be going all right. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'll send you the question on WhatsApp and you can read it.
Okay, why Krishna created so many different teachings from different religions? Okay. Well, it is not that, again, it would lead to conflicts. If we talk about conflict, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I audible to you?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. So, is it that when Krishna created different religions, why did he do so, knowing that it would lead to conflicts? It's not that the difference in religions is what leads to conflicts. It is the human mentality that is possessive and that is having a controlling tendency, that is the cause of conflict. And that is why we see that even if, say, assume there's only one religion, Hmm. Now we find that every religion has many groups within it. And within those groups, there are fights. Within Christianity, there was the Reformation, after which the Catholics and the Protestants split. In 100 years, there's a war going on. Within Islam, there's Shias and Sunnis, and there's a war going on. There's conflict going on even between them even now. And this is not just with respect to religion. We consider even secular ideologies. Even say in communism, there was fight not just between communists and non-communists, even among communists. There are moderates, there are hardliners, there are liberals. So the idea is that as long as human beings have a controlling tendency, as long as they have a tendency to be possessive, to be proud, then they will seek that I am right and everyone else is wrong. They will try to justify that by various means. And religion just becomes one such mean, especially self-righteous means, for people to try to prove that they are right. So if you consider religion, it's a starting point. From here, one could go towards my religion is right, so there is certainty. It could go to certainty, and from certainty, it could go to extremism. That I am right, and I am certain I am right. Therefore, anyone else who is saying anything different, they are wrong. And therefore, they deserve to be persecuted, ostracized, stigmatized, demonized, destroyed. So that's one trajectory that could be followed. But another could be one of the fundamental teachings of the religions of the world, especially of the Bhagavad Gita's path, is that humility. And if the wise people are humble, one of the first characteristics of knowledge is humility. So if there is humility, then humility leads to the understanding that God or the ultimate reality is far bigger than my conception of that ultimate reality. And while I can conceive the absolute truth in a particular way, but that does not intrinsically mean that the ultimate reality cannot reveal itself in some other way to somebody else. So there is a greater broad-mindedness, there is a greater acceptance, there is a greater inclusiveness. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the ethos Krishna says is that Mama Vartamanu Vartante Manushya Partha Sarvasha. And all people are on my path. It doesn't say, oh, my path is the only right path. Rather, everyone is in the path of raising their consciousness, and everyone is at different levels on that path. So the Gita, in that sense, is very inclusive. So we could have religion if it is understood properly, if it is applied properly, it is practiced with the proper motivations. Then it will actually foster humility, and humility will lead to broad-mindedness, tolerance, and that's the opposite of violence. But if a person brings into religion their ego and tries to use religion to boost their ego, then that will lead to accentuation of differences. That will lead to arrogance coming from certainty and extremism. So it's not religion it is not the difference in religions that is the cause of violence. It is the human mentality to seek control and superiority and use whatever resource we may find for that purpose, including religion, that causes conflicts.
Cool, thank you. And
now, just to add one more point,
yeah.
Why did Krishna create so many different teachings? Well, that is because different people are at different levels of consciousness. Different people come from different backgrounds. So it's not that a one-size-fits-all formula can work for everybody. Given the sheer diversity of humanity, there are naturally different approaches required. So Krishna, basically, when there are a wide variety of religions, and even within the broad Vedic path, there are various paths. There's Karma Yoga, there's Jnana Yoga, there's Bhakti Yoga. So all these different paths are there because different people are at different levels of consciousness. And from their particular level, they are given a facility to move forward. So the Gita's same verse that I quote, 4:11, it could be rendered into in English as, from your place, at your pace, access the divine grace. So from your place, at your pace, access the divine grace. So because different people are at different places, because different people want to grow at different paces, so naturally there are different paths that are given. So if you envision, I talked earlier about the spiritual level of consciousness, material level of consciousness. So the spiritual level of consciousness is like the top of a mountain, material level of consciousness at the bottom of the mountain. So, so it's not that there has to be only one path up the mountain. There could be different paths of the mountain, and different paths may suit different people. Some paths might be a little more rocky, some paths might be a little more forested. So different people may find different paths more challenging or less challenging. And depending on whichever path is a person is most comfortable with, that is the path they will take and they will grow forward.
I mean, I can think of some way some theists or atheists might want to comment here and say, yeah, but you going to want to say that your religion is the highest. So really what you're saying is all the other religions are kindergarten, and here you are with the advanced theology. So it's kind of inclusivism on the story, but really you're still saying your religion's better.
Well, there are two different things over here. One is there is inclusivism, and there is what is called as pseudo-inclusivism, where we say all paths are just the same. That's not exactly what we're saying is all paths are meant for the same purpose. Now, whether the various paths are meant for the same purpose, each one of them is equally good. We consider at one level the various religions to be like universities, and when we consider various religions to be like universities, a student who is studying in a particular university is free to have the conviction that their university is the best university. You cannot demand that you consider your university a lousy university and still study in that university. So in our tradition, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is a great philosopher saint, and he said that every man will think that that his wife is the most beautiful woman. But that does not mean that he should demand that every man should think that his wife, that means all other men should think that this man's wife is the most beautiful woman. No, there is a level of subjectivity involved over here, because the spiritual path is a personal path of personal relationship. So there is our individual relationship with the divine. There's our individual relationship with the tradition of teachers who have revealed the divine to us, and it is a matter of redirecting one's hearts and one's love. So just because a particular group of a particular religious path considers that that their path is the best, does not mean that they reject other paths. It does not mean that there's a condescending attitude towards other paths. It does not mean that it's a pseudo tolerance. It's just the understanding that there is a personal relationship that has been developed through a set of teachers and through a set of teachings, and naturally there is going to be the bond that is going to come because of that. So now it is other teachers from various paths are free to have that belief that the divine as revealed in their tradition is the highest. Now some religious traditions go further and they say that the divine is revealed only in their tradition and not in any other tradition. That is definitely not what we are saying. So this is not a monopoly on divinity by any means. Rather, it is an aspect of the personal nature of the connection with the divine, that naturally a person who is following a particular path will feel that the divine is most intimately, most sweetly, most personably revealed in the path that they're following. So that is the understanding of the Gaudiya Vaishnava path, which we are a part of. That does not mean that it's this personal realization is actually a testimony to the sublimity of the experience of the divine that is offered through the path.
I think something I could take from what you said, or perhaps another way of putting one of your points is, yeah, sure, we are saying that we feel personally that the religion we're practicing here is better than the others. But if somebody else wants to say they feel that way about their religion, we have no problem. So if we're not going to criticize other people for thinking the same thing about another path,
It's not that we are going. Yeah, it's not that we are going to wage. Yeah, exactly. We're not going to wage a war against them. That you have to accept that this is the best path. That is a definitely an individual level of subjectivity,
Yeah, I mean,
and we accept that.
I purchased a vehicle and I think, given my budget and my needs, I made the best purchase. Somebody else purchases a different vehicle and they think the same thing. We're not going to have an argument over it, right? They've done it. So why even
Well,
practice a religion at all unless you think it's the most true and the most helpful? That might be a good segue into a question we got from the live chat, which is about proof. So I can bring it up on the screen. Oh, you won't see it because there we go. So, unless you open the YouTube, you won't see it. So the question is: explain your God. Give proof for that God. I know Matt Dillahunty wants to know.
okay. You see, when we say proof about God, what do we mean by proof? There are different kinds of proof at different levels. If I say the time in India is 3:27 right now, 3:27 p.m., you can prove it by, you can call somebody in India. You can use a time calculator to find out what is the time difference. So there is a way to prove that or disprove that. But if I ask you, does your mother love you? Or did your mother love you? Now you will say, yeah, what kind of question is that? But how prove it? Now, how are we going to prove that? Generally, there is no mathematical test to prove it. The proof in this case is through a series of experiences that we can narrate, that, oh, when I was sick, my mother was awake all night taking care of me, or this, when I was having this trouble, she did this, she spoke this, she did this for me. So we have a series of incidents from which we infer the existence of our mother's love for us. So similarly, let's see, there are physical or gross realities which are measurable, and their proof is also mathematically measurable, relatively speaking. But there are subtler realities like love. It's with all our technological advancement, we don't have anything like a lovometer by which you can measure the love that anyone has for anyone else. So it's difficult to prove that. But it's more an inferential way of knowing. Now, with respect to Krishna as God, the understanding is, I would say, in three broad steps. First is that our understanding is that the ultimate reality is the source of everything. So there is personal existence within the manifested reality. You are a person, I'm a person, we are all persons. So in the source also, that personality has to be there. So that's the first aspect, that the ultimate reality has an ultimate personal dimension to it. The ultimate reality in that sense is a divine person. Then the second point is that if everything in this world has come from the divine, and the divine is the highest reality, that's by definition, then everything that is the best, the highest in this world is manifested in its fullness in the divine. So that is also one aspect of the characteristic of, so the broad characteristic of God is that God is the source of everything. The broad characteristic, now God could be a multi-level reality. God could have an impersonal dimension to it. God could also have a personal dimension to it, because we see impersonal energy in this world and we see personal existence in this world. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So now the personal existence that is there in this world, that is manifested in the divine, and especially Bhagavan. Bhagavan is that personal divinity. God is divinity in general. Bhagavan is personal divinity. That personal divinity manifests in its fullness everything that is attractive in this world. So there is attractive things in this world are beauty, strength, fame, wisdom, prowess, like that. So wealth, then equanimity, calmness, renunciation. So these are characteristics. I'm just giving a quick summary. There are attractive characters in the world which make people attracted to by others, attracted toward that person. So then those are manifested in the fullness in the divine. And Krishna is within the Bhakti Yoga tradition's understanding, that personal divinity who manifests beauty, wealth, strength, wisdom, all these characteristics in their fullness, in their zenith. So beyond all this, but beyond this, ultimately every heart longs for love. We all want to love and be loved. And that aspiration is there within us because we are parts of the divine. That aspiration is there within the divine also. So divinity is personal, divinity is attractive, and divinity is the embodiment of love. So the divinity is a reservoir of love, reciprocates love, and delights, rejoices in love. So that is the manifestation of the divine as Krishna. He is personal, he embodies attractive qualities, and he is an ocean of love. So that's the conception of God as Krishna. Okay, yeah, I got the question. Now, Sam Harris teaches and promotes the same cognitive self-direction counseling as Peterson, but Harris teaches meditation and more mature values. Why did you guys go with Peterson's books instead of Harris? Is it just that Harris calls himself an atheist, while Peterson is supposedly championing theism? Maybe you feel like Peterson's readers are seeking spiritual answers, while Harris readers want to think of themselves as secular skeptics. Well, there are 2-3 different things over here. Whether how much is the similarity between teachings of Harris and Peterson, that's open to question. They have had a discussion on elaborate discussion, I think, in Canada on facts and values. To what extent can values be inferred from facts as we know it? And it was a long session with serious debate, but it was largely inconclusive. So I would say that there are significant differences in their teachings. So now there is a practical or pragmatic aspect to any particular teacher's teachings. Okay, how you should manage yourself, how you should function in the world, and there may be similarities within the functional guidelines given by different people. So, for example, to some extent, self-restraint, self-discipline. This is something which is important in almost every major teaching of the world. Communism was atheistic, was aggressively atheistic, and yet communism was not hedonistic at all. Communism required a rigid sense of discipline, rigid sense of sacrifice of one's own goods for one's own goods for the benefit of the state. The promise was that the state would reward eventually, but the idea is just because there is similarity in terms of some practical guideline that okay, one should be disciplined, one should be sacrificing. That is taught in communism, and that is taught in theism. A communist teacher might teach something like that, and a theistic teacher might teach like that. So just because one aspect of the teachings are similar doesn't make the totality of the teaching similar. So from what I've seen is Sam Harris focuses on trying to make sense of things, and he draws on among the new atheists, you could say he's the most spiritually open. Like you mentioned, he talks about meditation. At the same time, he is aggressively against the theistic conception, especially as it is talked about in the Christian tradition. He's not really explored other traditions much. So just because the two of them, their teachings are similar, doesn't mean that some teachings are similar, doesn't mean that all their body of teaching is similar. And I personally focused on Jordan Peterson because I found many similarities, not just between his practical guidelines, but also between his philosophical postulations. If we consider, he's among the few teachers who starts by talking about how distress is inevitable in the world. He talks about how ultimately that there is why, but he talks about biology. He's rigidly into biological science, but he says no matter how deep we go into biology, ultimately there is something irreducible about the human person. So that is what the broad Vedic texts talk about. Our identity is multi-level. Our biology is a part of identity. Our psychology is a part of identity. But beyond the various biological and psychological layers, there's a base of spirituality that lies at the foundation of our identity. So I would say that the theistic or non-theistic aspect of their teachings was not the key thing, because broadly in the yoga tradition taught in the Bhagavad Gita, divinity is a later teaching, consciousness is a fundamental teaching, and we begin with consciousness, and as we try to understand consciousness, explore consciousness, elevate consciousness, then we start perceiving and pursuing a higher reality. That higher reality is what is called as divinity. So the approach of Jordan Peterson towards understanding reality and finding a responsible place for oneself in reality, I found it similar to many similarities in it to what the Vedic approach is, and that's why I chose him. It didn't have something so much to do with their atheism or theism as with the focus on as the acknowledgement of the irreducibility of consciousness and the role of individual responsibility for elevating one's consciousness.
One thing Jordan Peterson does that Sam Harris doesn't do is talk about ancient mythological stories and then try to unpack meaning from them. Sam Harris just kind of throws the whole thing out. So Jordan
Yes,
Peterson
definitely,
brings
that's true.
a way of kind of deciphering meaning from these metaphorical stories, which are ancient ways of passing down wisdom. And Sam Harris doesn't really approach those stories at all, other than to debunk them.
Yeah, true.
Next question from Mr. Cry9. Isn't the danger of confusing one's ascending symbolism with the descending symbolism inherent to the human condition / perception / psychology? So I think what he's asking there is descending symbolism would be revealed knowledge coming from God. Here's a way of looking at, here's some symbology which is symbolic of a bunch of meaning, and here's the meaning that's contained in that symbolism. Whereas ascending would be we invent our own symbols and invent our own meaning, and our representations of how we think reality is are just something we've invented and not divinely revealed. I'm thinking that's the question. What do you think?
Yeah. Two things. First is that danger is always there. That there is the ultimate reality and there is our understanding of the ultimate reality. So the two will never ultimately fully coincide. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that even the enlightened people keep enlightening themselves about the nature of the divine, about the glory of the divine, because the divine is unlimited. So enlightenment within the broad yogic tradition, and specifically within the Bhakti Yoga tradition, enlightenment is not a destination, not just a destination, it's also a journey. So as long as one is open to an understanding that there is more to reality than what we are perceiving at present, then yes, we have certain conceptions of reality, and we can't avoid having conceptions, because how do we think, how do we function without conceptions? But as long as you're open to understanding that that these conceptions that I presently have, they may be helpful for me on my spiritual journey, but that does not necessarily mean that these are the ultimate conceptions. Even if there is a ultimate conception that is revealed in a particular tradition that has come down a descending way to us, but it is we who are trying to understand it with our senses, with our mind, and there is going to be some limitation because of that. So how is that to be dealt with? That's why one of the key things is that humility, it is to understand that enlightenment is a journey, and we are open to further exploration, further understanding. So if we say this is a danger, then what is the way out of the danger? It's like saying that if I go on the road, there is a danger that I might meet with the accident. If I fly by airplane, then there's a danger that that might be a crash. Well, those dangers are there, but along with that, within those same systems of transportation, there are methods for protection that are given. there are inbuilt systems of checks and balances. So that's why the spiritual. So similarly, in the spiritual path also, there are inbuilt methods of checks and balances. And to the extent those checks and balances are adopted, are followed, to that extent one can be functioning without too much hazard, without too much danger. So what are the checks and balances? It is that as we get our realizations, as we get our experiences, as we arrive at our epiphanies, we do this in a community of spiritual seekers. And within that community of spiritual seekers, it is we learn about how reality is being perceived by others, and through that our understanding evolves. So some of our epiphanies may be a bit off, some of our epiphanies may be right, and some of our epiphanies may be spot on. So it can vary. That's why we have a system of checks and balances through which our present conceptions arrive at greater and greater alignment with the ultimate reality. But just like in math, we have that limit tends to zero. That means a function, it's going towards zero, but it will never reach zero. So like that, no one can claim that I know the ultimate reality comprehensively, exhaustively. Nobody can claim that. But we can arrive at an understanding of ultimate reality enough for us to know that ultimate reality is all attractive, and directing our love toward that reality is what will lead to the ultimate fulfillment.
Cool. And just a couple more questions and we can wrap it up soon. This one was, I can't remember who it's from. It was a comment under a recent video I had up. Will all of us go to hell if we don't believe a god in Hinduism? Can you hear me?
Well, in the broad Vedic tradition, hell, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah, carry on.
Okay. So in the broad, in the broad Vedic tradition, there is the idea that actions have consequences, and yes, there is a place which is called as hell, where certain people go, but the hell as a destination comes not for non-believers but for wrongdoers. Just like in a country, there may be people with different beliefs, but when some people, so it is not wrong action, that it is not wrong belief that is penalized, it is wrong action that is penalized. So if somebody acts in a way that is disruptive for social harmony, somebody acts in a way that is exploitative towards others, then that person is appropriately punished. And that is where the principle of karma comes in. And one punishment, one form of punishment, one form of disciplining is what is called as hell. So it is not that disbelief will send anyone to hell. A person can believe whatever they want, and it is when it is based on their actions that is decided where they will go. So it's not just because you don't believe in a particular god doesn't mean that one is going to go to hell. See, there are fundamental values and there are functional values. Fundamental values are based on our conception of the ultimate reality. Functional values are based on how we are acting in the world. So it's the functional values and the actions thereof that determine one's destination, whether one goes to hell or heaven. One's belief in God is a different ballgame. If one doesn't believe in God, that's up to them. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna does not demand belief. He persuades. He does not use his godhood to impose his way on everyone else. He focuses more on persuading and through reasoning. And then after that, he kuru. At the end, he says, now you do as you desire. So no, it's not just wrong belief that will take anyone to hell. That's not true in the Vedic path.
All right. I've got one more question from online comments. I think we've got a bit of a delay back and forth, but you're coming through fine in the live stream. So Timothy asked, can you comment on one argument against the soul not having a beginning? If the soul is eternal and has always existed, That means it had an infinite number of experiences in the past. An actual infinite number of past events can't exist in actual reality, only abstractly. Therefore, the soul can't have always existed.
Okay. So the question is that when we say something is cyclic, time is cyclical, it's just linear in a repetitive fashion. So actual number of infinite past events can't exist in actual reality. Okay. Well, then if by that argument we're going to say soul not have a beginning, that means the soul has a beginning. If we say, then by that argument we can say soul has to have an end also. We can say that infinite number of future events also can't exist in actual reality. Or are we saying that the past can't be infinite but the future can be? Well, that's inconsistent. If we are going to extrapolate about the nature of spiritual reality from our present domain, then it will go both ways. The soul will, if we say the soul has to have a beginning because the material world there is a beginning, then the material world at the end, the soul also has to have an ending. So then that's an argument against eternality itself. It's not against eternality, because the word eternal can be defined in two ways. The general traditional understanding of eternal is no beginning and no end. But some people also define eternal as having no end, even though there is a beginning. But that way, the same argument which says that soul has to have a beginning can also be used to say the soul has to have an end. So the idea is that yes, time is cyclical, and cyclical we can say is linear, going again and again. But the broad Vedic understanding is this domain of existence is not the only domain of existence. There are multiple universes. And in this domain, the soul may have gone in for a finite amount of time. But there are other domains in which the soul has been going on. And in that sense, infinity is not an impossibility. Yes, infinity within the present domain, which is beginning and end, is impossibility. But when we understand that reality extends beyond the present domain, then yes, before the beginning of this domain of existence, there existed another domain of existence, another universe. And the word universe has a particular limitedness in using it, because we use the word universe in a particular sense in modern science. But the idea is that if there are multiple domains of existence which exist not only at different places but at different times also, then there could be conceivably an infinity of existence also possible. So there could be an infinity of past, there could be an infinity of future. And the material domain also goes on infinitely with the cycles of existence and non-existence, of creation, maintenance, and destruction. And the spiritual domain also goes on infinite. So the soul's major transition is not that it has a beginning or that it can't have a beginning. Rather, the soul's existence can go to a domain which is timeless, where it does not have to go through the catastrophes of death and rebirth because its embodiment is being destroyed. The soul can realize its spirituality and then rejoice in life at the eternal domain. Okay.
Cool. I think we can wrap it up there. It's quite late here. I've got other things I need to do. So, yeah, I think that's it. Do you want to make any final comments?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for this thoughtful question, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
We were trying to schedule
Arjun,
this for a
Hare
while, and you were traveling, and then I was busy, and finally we managed to find a time to make it work.
Yes, delight to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. If anyone wants to suggest future topics, I can try to make those happen. There's one more question from the live chat. Roland is asking for proof that karma is real.
Well, what is the proof that karma is real? Well, it's just a extension. At one level, it's simply an extension of the cause-effect principle that is foundational both for daily life and for science. When we function, if somebody has an injury, okay, what happened? Did you stub yourself against something? Did you hit yourself against something? Now, chance is an admission of ignorance. It is not a proclamation of a causal principle. When doctors say that, oh, this particular disease, cancer, why does it happen? Well, we don't know an exact cause for it. That's okay. That does not mean it doesn't have a cause. It just means we don't know a cause. So my point is that cause-effect principle is something which we accept always. Even science operates based on cause-effect principles. That all the laws of physics, the laws of science, they are about how how causes and effects are connected. And a law is basically a mathematical articulation of the connection between cause and effect. So the bigger the picture that we take, the broader will be the cause effect connection that we will have to consider. So for example, Newtonian physics considered a cause effect within the framework of classical physics. So that's why we had the idea of gravity. And the idea of gravity was phenomenally successful for the first 300, 400 years of the scientific revolution. But then thereafter, as we started going into the domains which are extremely tiny, that is subatomic particles, or we started going into domains which are massive, like objects moving very fast near the speed of light, then we started finding that these laws don't seem to be applying. And to expand that frame of reference, expand our frame of analysis, we came up with quantum physics, we came up with relativity. So when there is something which is explaining some things, but when that same thing stops explaining, we don't reject that particular theory. Rather, we accommodated that theory within a bigger within a bigger theory. So similarly, we all acknowledge cause-effect correlation. Without that, we won't function. If our child does poorly in their exams, we ask, what happened? Did you not study? What happened? So we accept cause-effect principles. And in general, when we see that somebody acts responsibly, they get positive results. Somebody acts irresponsibly, they get negative results. So now within this, our observation, this works. But there are, just like Newtonian physics worked for most of reality. But there are some areas where it did not work. So similarly, in general, we all acknowledge that cause-effect correlation works. But there are some occasions where it doesn't seem to work. You can say many occasions where sometimes it is jarringly not working. So sometimes some people act responsibly, they act virtuously, they act in what you could say as good. They are good people, but bad things seem to happen to them. And some people are irresponsible, vicious, and still good things seem to be happening to them. So when this cause-effect principle does not seem to explain our lived experience, then we expand our frame of reference. We say that, yeah, maybe the causes and effects that are being correlated are not just from our present domain of existence. They could be from a previous level of existence, a previous life. So karma basically just expands our frame of reference to say that the cause-effect correlation exists not just in this life between our immediate actions, but it exists over a longer period of time with greater time delays between action and reaction. And that's how this framework can explain our observed reality better. So it's a logical, you could say, inference that can be drawn from an implicit or axiomatic truth that we accept in our day-to-day lives. Okay.
I've got one last question, actually. So, how different religions differ? So, I mean, one question could be, what's your elevator pitch on what Krishna consciousness is? But I think we could zoom in on one particular focus, which is how salvation takes place. So what's the metaphysics of how a particular self is saved from a conditioned state and enters into pure relationship with God, and then different religions conceive of whatever that ultimate state is differently. But just to sketch a few different Christian theories, basically they call them atonement theories. So to atone, to make whole. So we somehow hurt our relationship with God and we need to atone for that. We need to fix it. And basically for Christians, they boil this down to something that Jesus did on the cross. Generally. So Jesus saves. There's a few different Christian atonement theories. One is moral influence theory. I would rebrand it as a bhakti influence theory, and we can just assume the Christian doesn't have bhakti in their vocab, but they mean the same thing. Jesus came to inspire us, to share knowledge with us, and to influence us to develop pure love of God. And his life of compassion and hard work and teachings all achieves that. Other theories say Jesus changed something metaphysically when he was on the cross and resurrected. There's a few theories like this. One is he paid for our sins, paid a debt that we owed to God that we couldn't pay ourselves. He paid that off, and then we're off the hook, and God can forgive us. These theories come with certain Christian assumptions, such as that love and justice are competing goods. I think as Hare Krishnas, we'd be more inclined to say that love is an ultimate good and justice is a secondary good, and it brings about the ultimate good. Other versions of theories where Jesus changed something metaphysically or paid for something will be satisfaction theories of atonement. They're using the word satisfaction in a technical or traditional way, coming from an ancient word, so they don't mean the same thing we might think when we hear the word. But generally, it's this idea that God is such a great being, he needs to be
So,
honored.
do you want to have this question? Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to have this question at the end of the discussion, because this is a big question,
Oh, I can always.
and I don't think I can give a short answer.
I might take the
Maybe
stream.
we could discuss this in our next discussion, because it's a big question, broadly speaking, and it's a very specific question also.
Well, I can always just edit. I
can-
can always take the video offline and just post clips of it. So I could just post one clip of this section.
Okay, so I can just respond to it briefly, but we can have a whole discussion on this
We
subject
can
itself.
give a short answer if
But-
people are
so
interested.
two
We
thi-
can do a whole stream on it.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So see, there is the two broad things without getting into technicalities of different theories. See, there is the understanding that at a ethical level, we are all accountable for our actions. So that's when you could say in the Vedic context, that's called as karma. And we have done many actions, and we all have a karmic account. Means there's some positives, some negatives, and this account keeps us bound in this world. And there is also the soul's nature to seek and love something beyond this world. And so this is broadly referred to as our material credits, or which can be positive, negative, and then this is what is called as spiritual credits, our spiritual attraction toward the divine. So ultimately, if we want to attain the divine, the spiritual credits are what are most important. That our love for the divine is to be so strong that that say in our tradition, Krishna, our desire for Krishna is more than our desire for everything else. We could say, what is a pure devotee? A pure devotee has desire only for Krishna. That is a very elevated stage. But even if one is not at that stage, at least our desire for Krishna is greater than our desire for anything else. So that is the spiritual side. Now, how does this desire come about? That desire comes about by our endeavor, it's called sadhana, our spiritual practices. That desire comes out by grace, which is the mercy of the Lord coming through his various manifestations, the saints, the sacred texts, the holy places, his deities. So that's how the spiritual connection, the spiritual attraction is developed. Now, while we are developing a spiritual attraction, the primary criteria for attaining the divine in the bhakti tradition is that the spiritual attraction has to be developed. And the spiritual attraction is a result of our endeavor and divine grace combined together. Now, having done that, simultaneously, there is something else, that we are still functioning in the world. And while functioning in the world, we still have our karmic bank account. And even if our spiritual attraction is sufficiently developed, that does not necessarily mean our karmic account has been neutralized or exhausted. We may have some positive karma remaining, we have some negative karma remaining. So how is that to be dealt with? So these two are different things, although they are related. They are related in the sense that they are both related. They both apply to the same individual seeker. But the idea is that the material dimensions of our credits, the positives and negatives, they will be handled by the divine in a way that is conducive for our spiritual growth. That's what in the Bhagavad Gita says, Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishami. So Mam Ekam Sharanam Rajais, you develop that vertical connection with me, you surrender to me, you make me your highest priority. And then at a material level, what might go right or wrong, I will deal with that. I'll handle that. Now, What does handling that mean? Does it mean that in one magical stroke it will all disappear? It doesn't necessarily happen like that. It is that we go through our life journey, we will have our ups and downs, but we will rise upward to the spiritual level of reality. So that's the broad understanding that there's, as I said, there's a spiritual dimension, there's the ethical dimension. So the spiritual dimension is what is primarily important, and the ethical dimension is accordingly dealt with by the Lord. But does that mean that just by one act of accepting the divine as one savior or one act of surrender, the entire karmic account will be neutralized? Well, not exactly. A devotee seeker or even a devotee seer will have to go through ups and downs in the world, because that's just the nature of the world. But to the extent that spiritual attraction is developed, the ups and downs will not affect the person. So this is embodied in our tradition in the example of a great spiritualist named Bhishma. So Bhishma was a warrior. He was a great devotee, but he was also caught on the wrong side in an ethical war. And now he's supported, or at least consented, if not through crimes of commission, but through crimes of omission. He supported some of the wrongdoings of the bad guys, the Kauravas. So at a material level, according to some teachers of tradition, he had the results coming to him. He had what might be considered excruciatingly painful death, where dozens and dozens, hundreds of arrows had pierced his body, and he was lying on an arrow bed for days and weeks together. But because his spiritual attraction to the divine had developed, he did not feel the pain due to the arrows. So he was absorbed in the divine. So at a material level, some reactions, some actions might come, but at a spiritual level, if one's consciousness is elevated, those will not affect the person that much. So that's how does salvation come about? Salvation comes about by primarily establishment of the divine connection, and then secondarily by the appropriate management of the material reactions that are meant to be dealt with based on one's accumulated past karma. Okay, we could discuss this more later, bro. Thank you very much.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for your time. And
Thank you.
I'll just
Thank you, Arjun.
an outro. So if you like this sort of stuff, be sure to subscribe. Let us know what you think in the comments, and I'll catch you on the next one. Hare Krishna.